Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to provide context in the war in Ukraine. Some very big things have happened, so stay with me. If you're not familiar with what I'm doing in this video or this series of videos, in the morning I do a daily brief of Ukrainian war news. In the evenings I do 3 big stories, sometimes more, and sometimes in between during the day I'll do others that are related to Ukraine. Recently I've been in a series of what's happened on this day in the Cold War. Okay, let's get right to it. 1,190 Russians off the battlefield, 4 tanks, 32 armored combat vehicles, 45 artillery systems, 49 vehicles and fuel tanks. This number is pretty consistent with what we've seen since about May. Andrew Perpetua's numbers look like they're about 2-to-1 losses of Russians to Ukrainians, maybe a little bit north of that. Russians have damaged one of the 2 power lines powering the occupied Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant. The station is on the verge of a blackout, authorities are telling us. Degradation of the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant, which has been under Russian occupation since March 4th, 2022, is deepening. On Thursday, August 22nd, due to Russian shelling, there was damage to the external overhead line. Through it, the temporarily occupied Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant received power from the Ukrainian energy system to meet its needs. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Now, let's look at what Ukraine is doing to Russia, and that's the way that we ought to frame what's happening here. Rostov Oblast, Ukrainian attack drones reportedly struck the burning remains of the Russian Rostov Oil depot again overnight. So this has been on fire for like 4 or 5 days now, and they hit it again. Russian channels report the highly flammable kerosene storage tanks are at risk. Yeah, it's pretty bad for them. The Ukrainian strikes the oil depot. Here's another picture of it. Now, this is totally separate. I know it looks like, we're looking at fire and fire, but this is a very different fire. Ukrainian Navy took responsibility for a strike sinking Russia's last operational railway ferry. This is really important because it cuts off the transport of materials from the mainland of Russia over to the Kerch region. The attack is possibly involving domestic Neptune missiles severely impacts Russian military logistics to occupied Crimea. Okay, here's the Euromaidan press article about it. Ukrainian Navy confirms the Kerch Strait's last Russian ferry destruction, implying Neptune missile use. Again, that's a pretty big fire. The Navy destroyed a ferry at Port Kavats that was transporting fuel for the Russian armed forces. It was the last of the operational ferries, and this is what it looks like in Radio Free Europe. Yeah, that's hit pretty hard. It's not a good look. All right. Now, this is different now. This is yesterday. There was the strike on the Marinovka airfield in Volgograd. Volgograd is formerly Stalingrad, I think. Yeah, I think that's correct. Looks like a lot of damage to Russian military aviation. So yesterday I told you, here's the strike. We'll find out. Next couple of days, we'll find out what's actually happened here. Well, here's what's actually happened here. So pictures published from the airbase show shredded hangars. One of the pictures that you can see, apparently each hangar had a parked plane. Aside from detonated munitions, there are clearly losses to airframes. Okay, so you can see that. Now, part of the reason for this is that the Ukrainians' drones have like a ball bearings in them, tungsten bearings in them that will blow out, kind of like what a Claymore mine used to do, is that sort of thing. And so yeah, so look at the shreddedness of this hangar. Like, so that's all these little bearings going through, and if there's a plane in there, those planes are getting tagged as well. Okay, here is Suchomimus, and we're going to watch like just a minute or two of what he has to say about this.
Let's zoom in on some key areas. So, 3 hangars here at least were completely destroyed by drone impacts, 1 partially destroyed. The aircraft on the flight line looked to have escaped. This is quite normal. These drones are slow moving, and as Russia usually does have plenty of time, they do evacuate the aircraft. If of course the drones are detected, so we get the aircraft up in the air and out of the way. The aircraft often hit on these drone strikes at bases are either those undergoing repair and maintenance, or the ones who just didn't have time to remove. Here, the flight line was clear at the time, but the hangars were hit. I'll zoom in soon. Firstly, as well as the aircraft hangars, A little hangar or warehouse north of them, not sure what it was used for, was completely destroyed as well. You can also see that at least one of the other hangars was damaged, with a massive rip in it. Here, MT Anderson zooms in, so moving left to right, the hangar with a rip in it can be seen to have a Su-34 inside. This will definitely be damaged, and I'll get to the reason why soon. The hangar next to it is damaged, but we can't see inside. Then, we get to the destroyed hangars. One destroyed Su-34 is visible in the central red box. To the left, you can make out fragments of a Su-34 which looks to have been absolutely obliterated. This could be fragments of a central Su-34, of course, but given this looks to be right where a hangar was, I think it's a different one. To the right, a zoomed in section of another hangar or warehouse. No idea what was here, but it was certainly heavily burned.
Okay, so we'll look at one more little clip where he gives a summary.
Very likely took damage from them. So all in all, an excellent strike here by Ukraine. By my count, 3 Su-34 destroyed and a number lightly damaged.
So at least 3 destroyed, a number of others perhaps are damaged, and so that was a good strike for Ukraine. Okay, breaking Russian Volgograd region, convicts of the prison number 19 have taken hostages. Nothing to do with the drone strike. Prisoners are taking hostages. This happened during a meeting of the disciplinary committee meeting, propagandists right. Terrorists who have taken over the prison are demanding helicopter land directly on the territory of the prison with $2 million on board, and they threaten to kill the hostages if they're pursued. So Russia has other problems that have nothing to do with Ukraine. Okay, let's turn our attention to Kursk. So they're pushing into Kornevo village, which is different than the town of Kornevo, and they're also pushing another direction here as well. If you're below the Sem and the Sem River and you're a Russian, you're kind of trapped. I mean, that's the reality of where they are right now, and they keep trying to push across the river and keep getting blown up. It's pretty astonishing to see. Kremlin seeks to downplay Ukraine's incursion. like that's really what they're doing. That's how they're handling the crisis. The Kremlin response to Ukrainian soldiers controlling a slice of Russia's Kursk region has been muted so far, as it gets on with business as usual rather than making some kind of threatening speeches saying how terrible the Ukrainians are. Now, this was a political scientist, Ekaterina Shulman. I've talked about her before. It's the usual way he acts in similar circumstances, disappearing until the situation, we're talking about Putin, disappearing until the situation sizzles down and then making it look like everything is normal. He can't be tarnished by that. He has to give himself some distance and blame someone else. Russia has been at war for 30 months and it tolerates no criticism. Russians, they say, have been used to the highs and lows of their army's feats and will not be put off by weeks, even months, of losing some border villages. Coverage on Russian state television is focused on the humanitarian angle, Kursk evacuees and the volunteers helping them, rather than, well, the Ukrainian military is doing this, and our boys are doing, well, what exactly? Anger over how Ukrainian troops could so easily cross into Russian territory and how slowly the government responded has been muted. But I'll tell you how that happened in just a moment. It's not felt at a nationwide level, and it's just seen as part of the war. But experts said that there are signs that support for a negotiated end to the fighting has increased. In the surveys of the past 6 months, we've seen this paradoxical situation. The respondents simultaneously say, we support everything, because they kind of have to say we support everything. We were right to start the special military operation, because they kind of had to say that we were right to do that, but it has to end. That's the new part. Okay, so let's go on to the next topic here. Here's how the war actually the Kursk invasion actually got underway. General Lapin of Russia weakened the defense of Kursk region shortly before the Ukrainian offensive, according to the Washington Post. The report states that he dissolved the council responsible for the region's defense a few months before Ukraine's operation. The article highlights that Lapin's lack of awareness regarding battlefield realities is a common issue with Russia's military leadership. Despite knowing that Ukrainian forces were increasing near the border, and they did know that, and sending warnings to Moscow, the Kremlin did not take action, dismissing Ukraine's maneuvers as psychological warfare tactics. So this guy is who we could thank for the Kursk invasion. Okay, and this is carried in the Wall Street Journal as well. Okay, unable to propagandize their way out of Ukraine's expanding hold on Russian territory, the Russian Ministry of Nonsense begins to campaign to convince the world that Ukraine is using chemical weapons. I'm not making this up. It's in the Kyiv Post. They're saying that the Ukrainians have resorted to the use of chemical weapons in order to break through Russian defensive positions, as if they're not going to be affected by it. So if you see Ukrainians not all suited up in chemical weapon outfits, what would that mean? Like if Russians are dressed up like that, but Ukrainians aren't? Just a thought. Okay, pro-Russian mill bloggers have begun to spread false claims on Telegram, according to the Center for Countering Disinformation. According to Russian propagandists, the Ukrainian army, in violation of international law, used chemical weapons on Russian positions, the CCD said, but they said the claims are entirely fabricated. Just a little bit more, the spread of such disinformation is part of the Kremlin strategy to influence public perception regarding the events in the Kursk region. Okay, a little bit more breaking. Ukrainian armed forces have launched an offensive in the Kharkiv direction. Russian front line was breached by 2 kilometers. That doesn't mean that they're getting into Volgograd, but the front line in Ukraine has been breached. Russians abandoned old people, women, sick children. It's good that the Ukrainians brought us water and bread. We were without water for a whole week. No electricity, no water, no gas, no nothing. These are Russians being interviewed in Sudzha. CNN said that a journalist, Nick Walsh's trip to Sudzha, did not violate international law. What are they talking about? Well, Russia is opening a criminal investigation into the CNN correspondent reporting in Ukrainian-occupied Russia. Well, that's what reporters actually do. That's like what they're supposed to do. And it's protected activity according to the rights of journalists under the Geneva Convention and international law. Ben Hodges said Ukraine is conducting multi-domain operations, long-range precision strike against Russian energy, transportation, and infrastructure, a land-centric counteroffensive in Kursk that is changing the momentum and the info narrative. We should just provide the ammo and get out of the way. Couldn't be more right. Finally, my friends, it is Ukraine's Day of the National Flag. I saw this and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Sometimes you have an impression while traveling in Ukraine that you can find the Ukrainian flag painted by nature itself. How about that? All right, my friends, thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.